Hello everyone, please hit the subscribe button on your screen and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I never believed in fate until that rainy Tuesday night when death and destiny collided on my doorstep. Blood doesn't lie on concrete, it screams. And there was so much of it pooling beneath her pale, crumpled body in that alley behind my apartment building. My name is Elijah Reed. At 32, I had already survived more than most, growing up in West Side projects, losing my mother to cancer I couldn't afford to treat, working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on in my 1-bedroom apartment. People like me don't get second chances. We don't get fairy tales. We get by. That's all we do. That night, I was trudging home after a 14-hour shift at the warehouse. My shoulders ached from lifting boxes, my stomach growled from skipping lunch to make rent, and the rain had soaked through my only good pair of work boots. I took the shortcut through the alley, the one my neighbors avoided after dark, because my feet couldn't bear another step. That's when I heard it. A whimper so soft it could have been the wind, but something made me stop. Something made me listen. Hello? I called, squinting into the darkness between the dumpsters. No answer came, but my eyes adjusted enough to catch a flash of something white against the grimy pavement. Moving closer, I realized it was a hand, slender, manicured, and trembling. "Oh God," I whispered, rushing forward. She lay there like a broken doll, designer clothes torn and soaked with rain and blood. Her face was swollen, one eye already blackening, but even through the damage, I could tell she was beautiful. Young, maybe 25. Blonde hair matted with blood. And dying, right there in my arms. "Stay with me," I urged, pressing my jacket against the wound in her side. "What's your name?" Her eyes fluttered. "Claire," she whispered, before losing consciousness entirely. I should have called 911. That's what anyone else would have done. But people who look like me don't always trust the system. 3 black men in my neighborhood had been arrested last month after calling for help during a break-in. Cops said they fit the description. So instead, I made a choice that would change both our lives forever. I lifted Claire's broken body and carried her to my apartment. I cleaned her wounds as best I could with my limited first aid knowledge from that community college course I'd taken years ago. The stab wound in her side wasn't as deep as I'd feared. But she was burning with fever, muttering deliriously about someone finding her. For 3 days, I nursed this stranger back from the brink, missing work and using the last of my savings for antibiotics from my cousin who worked at the pharmacy. I slept on the floor beside my bed where she lay, jumping at every noise outside my door, wondering if whoever had done this to her was still searching. On the 4th morning, I woke to find her sitting up, staring at me with eyes as blue and cold as winter sky. "You saved my life," she said simply. I nodded, suddenly aware of how my apartment must look to someone like her, the peeling paint, the mismatched furniture from thrift stores, the careful way I rationed everything from soap to coffee. "Who are you?" she asked. "Just someone who couldn't walk away," I answered, not knowing then that those words would become the truest definition of who I was, and who I would become. "They're still looking for me," she whispered, clutching my worn blanket to her chest. "And they won't stop until I'm dead." That's when I noticed the small tattoo on her wrist, partially hidden but unmistakable. A symbol I'd seen before, plastered across billboards and buildings throughout the city. The emblem of Hamilton Enterprises, the corporate giant whose CEO had just been in the news for. Her eyes followed mine. "Yes," she said. "That's my father's company." She wasn't just any woman I'd rescued from an alley. I had stumbled into something far bigger than myself, something dangerous. Because Claire wasn't just Claire, she was Claire Hamilton, daughter of the most powerful man in the city. And someone wanted her dead badly enough to leave her bleeding in an alley in the worst part of town. "I have nowhere to go," she said, her voice breaking. "No one I can trust. Except, maybe, you." That moment, her trust in me, a stranger who had nothing to offer but a safe place to heal, changed something inside me. For the first time in my life, I had saved something beautiful instead of just surviving myself. What I didn't know then was that saving Claire Hamilton would cost me everything I had and give me everything I never knew I wanted. Before I continue, kindly hit the subscribe button on your screen. The next few days unfolded like a fever dream. Claire's strength returned gradually, but her fear never diminished. Each time a car slowed outside my building, her body would tense. Each time my phone rang, her eyes would widen with panic. "You don't understand what my father is capable of," she explained one night as we shared a simple dinner of rice and beans, all I could afford after missing nearly a week of work. Hamilton Enterprises isn't just a corporation. It's an empire built on secrets. "What kind of secrets?" I asked, watching how even in my faded t-shirt and sweatpants, she carried herself with an elegance I'd never possess. Claire twisted the napkin in her lap. "The kind people disappear for knowing." She told me about offshore accounts, about dealings with dictators and arms dealers, about documents she'd discovered locked in her father's private safe. Evidence of crimes that would topple empires if revealed. I confronted him, she whispered. I thought he was still my father underneath it all. The bruise on her face had faded to a sickly yellow, but her eyes held a deeper pain. He called his head of security while I was standing there. Said I'd become a liability. I'd grown up distrusting the wealthy, believing their money insulated them from the harsh realities of my world. But looking at Claire, hunted, betrayed by her own blood, I realized money couldn't buy what mattered most: loyalty, compassion, humanity. "Why not go to the police?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The Hamilton name was on half the police stations in the city. She gave me a sad smile. "My father employs them, Elijah. Directly or indirectly." That night, as she slept in my bed and I lay awake on the couch, I made a decision I knew would change the trajectory of my life. I would help her escape, not just from the immediate danger, but from the gilded cage she'd been raised in. The next morning, I called in a favor from my childhood friend David, who worked at the bus station. 2 tickets to a coastal town 3 states away, paid in cash, no names recorded. "We leave tomorrow at dawn," I told Claire. "Pack light. Wear this." I handed her the plainest clothes I could find: jeans, a hoodie, sneakers. She took them without complaint, this woman who probably had closets bigger than my entire apartment. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. "You don't know me. You've already risked so much." I thought about my mother, how she'd taught me that character isn't measured by what you have, but by what you give when you have nothing. "Because it's right," I said simply. "And there's not enough of that in this world." Something shifted in her expression then: respect, maybe. Or understanding that the distance between our worlds wasn't as vast as she'd been taught. That night, as we packed the few belongings we could carry, a black SUV pulled up outside my building. Through the crack in my blinds, I watched 3 men in suits exit the vehicle. "They found me," Claire whispered, her face draining of color. I pulled her away from the window. "Fire escape. Now." We fled with nothing but the clothes on our backs and the envelope of cash I kept taped under my kitchen sink, my entire life savings of $2,317. The rain had returned, drenching us as we ran through back alleys and side streets. Claire kept pace despite her still healing wounds, her determination matching my own. We reached the bus station an hour before our scheduled departure, soaked and breathless. "David," I called to my friend at the ticket counter. "We need to." The look on his face stopped me cold. Guilt. Fear. Apology. "I'm sorry, Elijah," he whispered. "They offered $50,000 for information. My kid needs surgery." Before he finished speaking, I grabbed Claire's hand and ran. Behind us, I heard the doors burst open, heavy footsteps gaining. We ducked into the maintenance corridor, through the employee exit, and out into the storage yard behind the station. Chain-link fence surrounded us on 3 sides. Nowhere to go. "Elijah," Claire's voice trembled as she squeezed my hand. "I'm so sorry I brought this into your life. In that moment, looking at her rain-soaked face illuminated by the harsh security lights, I realized something that terrified me more than the men pursuing us. I was falling in love with her. Not with Claire Hamilton, heiress to a fortune, but with the woman who had shown more courage and humanity in a week than most people do in a lifetime. I'd do it again, I told her. Every bit of it. The sound of a gun being cocked echoed in the yard. We turned to find a man in an expensive suit pointing a weapon at us. His face was expressionless, professional. "Miss Hamilton," he said coldly. "Your father would like you to come home." Claire stepped forward, shielding me with her body. "If I come with you, you'll let him go." "No," I protested, pulling her back. "You know that's not how this works." The man smiled without warmth. Smart man. Unfortunately, Mr. Hamilton was quite clear. No witnesses. He raised his gun, aiming at my chest. I closed my eyes, waiting for the impact. Instead, I heard a deafening crash. The security guard from the station had driven a maintenance vehicle through the fence, creating an escape route. "Run," he shouted. "I owe your mother, Elijah. She saved my wife at the hospital years ago." We bolted through the opening as gunshots rang out behind us. Into the rainy night we fled, two people from different worlds now bound by a common enemy and something else, something neither of us had dared name yet. What I didn't know then was that Claire carried something more valuable than her father's secrets. Something that would give us the power to fight back against forces that had seemed invincible. And the next 24 hours would reveal just how far both of us would go to protect not just our lives, but the fragile trust growing between us. Dawn broke over an unfamiliar horizon as Claire and I huddled in the back of a freight train headed west. My clothes were still damp, my muscles ached, and the cut on my forehead from climbing the rail yard fence throbbed with each heartbeat. But we were alive. For now, that was enough. Claire sat across from me, knees pulled to her chest, watching the landscape blur past the partially open door. In the soft morning light, with her hair tangled and dirt smudging her cheek, she looked nothing like the polished heiress whose face occasionally graced society pages. She looked real. Human. Beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. "What are you thinking?" I asked, offering her the last of our water. She took a small sip and passed it back. "Always careful. Always fair. I'm thinking about how I never rode in anything but private cars and jets until a week ago," she said with a sad smile. "And how I felt more alive in these terrible days than in all my years of privilege." "Fear will do that," I replied. She shook her head. "It's not fear, Elijah. It's freedom. Even running for my life, I'm making my own choices for the first time." We fell silent, the rhythmic clacking of the train filling the space between us. As the sun climbed higher, Claire reached into her boot and withdrew a small object that caught the light, a USB drive on a thin chain. "This is what my father would kill for," she said quietly. "What I was willing to die for." I moved closer. "What's on it?" "Evidence of everything. Money laundering through orphanages in developing countries. Bribes to officials. Medical trials conducted without consent." Her voice broke. The night I confronted him, I had just discovered records proving he'd knowingly released contaminated water in 3 poor neighborhoods to avoid a recall that would hurt the company's stock price. 27 children died, Elijah. Their families were paid off and silenced. The rage in her eyes mirrored what I felt burning in my chest. Those neighborhoods could have been mine. Those children could have been me. I took everything I could find, she continued. But this, she held up the drive, this is the key. It contains account numbers, dates, names. Enough to destroy not just my father, but everyone complicit in his crimes. Why not just send it anonymously to the press? I asked. The encryption requires authentication every 72 hours or it permanently locks. My father's security chief designed it that way for all sensitive company data. She looked at me intensely. That's why they need me alive, at least long enough to access the files. I understood then the impossible position she was in. A daughter with evidence to destroy her father. An heiress rejecting her inheritance. A woman brave enough to risk everything for justice. We can't run forever, I said, stating what we both knew. No. She reached out, her fingers brushing mine. But we can fight back. We jumped from the train at the next small town, using some of my dwindling cash to buy burner phones from a convenience store. Claire made one call to her former college roommate, now working as a prosecutor in the state attorney's office. Sydney? It's me. Yes, I'm alive. Listen carefully. While she talked, I stood watch, scanning every passing car, every face that turned our way. This world of corporate espionage and lethal consequences was foreign to me, yet somehow I'd adapted. Perhaps because survival had always been my specialty, just in different circumstances. Claire returned, her face set with determination. Sydney will help us, but we need to get to her in person. She has connections to federal prosecutors who aren't in my father's pocket. How do we know we can trust her? She lost her brother to a Hamilton Enterprises pharmaceutical that was rushed through testing. She's been looking for a way to bring my father down for years. We spent that night in an abandoned hunting cabin Claire remembered from a childhood trip, a place her father would never connect to her. As the temperature dropped, we huddled together before a small fire, sharing what little food we'd managed to buy. Tell me something real about you, she whispered. Something I couldn't learn from looking at your apartment or knowing your job. I thought for a moment. I write poetry. Bad poetry, probably. But it helps me make sense of things. She smiled, the firelight dancing across her face. Will you share some with me sometime? If we live through this, I promised, trying to sound lighter than I felt. We will. She leaned her head against my shoulder. What will you do after? Go back to your life. The question hung between us, loaded with unspoken implications. Could there be an after that included both of us? A man who worked 3 jobs to survive and a woman born into billions? I don't know if I can go back, I admitted. Everything feels different now. Because of the danger. Because of you. In the silence that followed, she lifted her face to mine. The kiss wasn't passionate or desperate. It was gentle. Questioning. A possibility neither of us had dared acknowledge until now. When we pulled apart, her eyes searched mine. They'll use this against us, she whispered. They'll say I manipulated you. Or that you were using me. Let them, I answered. We know the truth. Morning came too soon, along with the sound we'd been dreading, vehicles approaching on the dirt road. Claire checked the window and paled. 3 cars. Black SUVs. We grabbed our few belongings and fled through the back door, racing toward the dense woods behind the cabin. Shots rang out, splintering bark near my head. Claire cried out, stumbling, and I saw red blooming on her sleeve. A bullet had grazed her arm. I scooped her up despite her protests, running deeper into the forest, my lungs burning. We reached a steep ravine with a river churning below, too far to jump, too steep to climb down safely. Behind us, voices and footsteps grew closer. Before us, a 30-foot drop to rushing water. Elijah, Claire gripped my hand, blood seeping through her fingers. Whatever happens, promise me you'll get this drive to Sydney. She pressed the USB chain into my palm. We're getting there together, I insisted, searching desperately for another escape route. The first of our pursuers broke through the tree line, weapon raised. Claire looked at me, her eyes filled with something I'd never seen before, not fear, but fierce resolve. I love you, she said. I didn't know people like you existed until a week ago. Then she did the unthinkable. She shoved me aside and stepped toward our attackers, hands raised. I surrender, she called out. But only to my father. In person. I lunged for her, but 2 more men emerged from the trees, cutting me off. In that split second of distraction, Claire gave me one last look, a command to run, to finish what she'd started. And then, as gunfire erupted around us, I made the most difficult choice of my life. I ran. God help me, I ran. Every step away from Claire felt like betrayal, like my heart was being torn from my chest. But the weight of the USB drive around my neck reminded me of what was at stake: justice for 27 dead children, for countless lives ruined by corporate greed, for a system that had been broken long before Claire and I crossed paths. I heard her voice in my head: whatever happens, promise me you'll get this drive to Sydney. 3 miles of dense forest later, I emerged onto a rural highway, thumb out, the drive securely hidden beneath my shirt. A middle-aged woman in a pickup truck stopped, eyeing my blood-streaked face with concern. "You all right, son?" I wasn't. I would never be all right again unless I could save Claire. But I nodded and climbed in. "Just need to get to Harrisburg," I said, naming the city where Sydney worked. "Family emergency." She didn't ask questions, just turned up her gospel music and drove. I stared out the window, watching the landscape change from wilderness to suburbs to city, all while my mind replayed Claire's last words. "I love you. I didn't know people like you existed until a week ago." By nightfall, I stood outside the federal courthouse where Sydney had agreed to meet me. The prosecutor was nothing like I'd imagined, a petite woman with prematurely grey hair and eyes that had seen too much. "Where's Claire?" she demanded. The word stuck in my throat. "They have her. Her father's men." Sydney's face hardened. "Then we don't have much time. Once they access the drive." "They can't," I interrupted, pulling out the USB. "Not without her. And not without this." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You're the man who saved her. The one she called about." "My name is Elijah Reed." "Well, Mr. Reed, you've just handed me the case of a lifetime." She examined the drive. "But without Claire's authentication." "I'm not here to just hand over evidence," I said firmly. "I'm here to make a deal. You get Claire back safely, then you get the files." Sydney studied me for a long moment. "You love her." It wasn't a question. "Enough to know she'd rather die than see her father escape justice," I answered. "But I'm betting he loves her too, in his twisted way." "Jackson Hamilton doesn't love anyone but himself," Sydney replied bitterly. "Then he at least values her? As leverage, as the key to the encryption, as his blood." I leaned forward. "And that's our advantage." What followed was 24 hours of the most intense planning I'd ever been part of. Sydney brought in 2 FBI agents she trusted implicitly. I shared everything I knew about Claire's captors, the evidence, the encryption system. Together, we crafted something bold, dangerous, and possibly insane. Our plan hinged on one crucial belief, that Jackson Hamilton would want to see his daughter face to face before deciding her fate. The call was made from a secure line. My voice steady despite the fear churning inside me. "Mr. Hamilton. You have something I want. I have something you need." His voice was cultured, controlled, the voice of a man who bought and sold lives as easily as stocks. "Who is this?" "The man who saved your daughter in that alley. The man with her encryption key." A pause. "I'm listening." An exchange. "Claire for the drive. In person. Just you, me, and whatever security makes you comfortable." He laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "You're in no position to make demands. Check your company's secure servers," I countered. "Try to access the files. You'll find they've already started corrupting. Claire's authentication window is closing." Another pause, longer this time. I held my breath. The Hamilton Tower. Midnight. My office on the top floor. "I'll be there." The line went dead. Sydney looked at me, concern etched in her features. "You know this is a trap." I nodded. "For both of us." That night, I stood in the plaza before Hamilton Tower, a gleaming monument to wealth and power that stretched into the night sky. The USB drive hung around my neck, a small recording device hidden in my jacket, Sydney's insurance. Security guards flanked me in the private elevator that whisked me to the 60th floor. My heart pounded, but not from fear. From purpose. From the certainty that whatever happened next would define the rest of my life, however long or short that might be. The doors opened to reveal an office larger than my entire apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city spread below like a carpet of stars. Jackson Hamilton stood behind a massive desk, every inch the titan of industry in his tailored suit and imperious stance. And there, seated in a chair beside him, was Claire. Her eyes found mine immediately, widening in alarm. "Why are you here?" they seemed to say. "Run." So, Hamilton's voice cut through the silence. "You're the hero my daughter has thrown away her future for." I kept my expression neutral. Where I'm from, protecting someone who's hurt isn't heroism. It's humanity. "And where exactly are you from, Mr. Reed?" He spat my name like something distasteful. "My security chief tells me you work as a warehouse loader. A janitor. A night watchman. 3 jobs and you still live in squalor." "Father, stop." Claire's voice was hoarse, as if she'd been shouting, or crying. A bruise darkened her cheekbone, fresher than the one I'd treated in my apartment. "I came for Claire," I said evenly. Not a critique of my socio-economic status. Hamilton's eyebrows raised slightly, surprised, perhaps, that a man like me knew such terms. "You have something that belongs to me," he said. "She doesn't belong to anyone." His face flushed with anger. "The drive, you imbecile." I reached slowly for the chain around my neck, drawing out the USB. "Release her first." Hamilton nodded to one of his security guards, who roughly pulled Claire to her feet. She stumbled forward, and it took everything in me not to rush to her. "Elijah," she whispered. "You shouldn't have come." Our eyes met, and in that moment, everything else faded away, the danger, the wealth disparity, the impossibility of our situation. All that remained was the truth we'd discovered in each other. "The drive," Hamilton demanded, extending his hand. I held it up, just out of reach. "You know what's on this. You know what you've done." His expression hardened. "What I've done is build an empire that employs thousands. That funds hospitals and schools. That advances humanity. At the cost of actual humans," I replied. "Those children in Westbrook. The patients in your trials. The communities you poisoned. Necessary sacrifices for the greater good." Claire shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I believed that once. Believed in you. But there is no greater good in what you've done, Father. Only greater profit." Something flickered in Hamilton's eyes. Regret? Shame? It vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. "Enough," he snapped. "The drive. Now. Or neither of you leaves this room alive." I stepped forward, USB extended. As Hamilton reached for it, I pressed the hidden button on my watch, the signal. The doors behind us burst open. Sydney and her FBI agents flooded in, weapons drawn. "Jackson Hamilton, you're under arrest." Chaos erupted. Security guards drew weapons. Hamilton lunged for the drive. Claire screamed a warning as one guard aimed at me. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Claire threw herself between me and the gun. A shot rang out. I caught her as she fell, crimson blooming across her chest. "No!" I screamed, cradling her. "Claire, stay with me. Please." Her eyes found mine, surprisingly calm. "Did we do it?" she whispered. Over her body, I watched Hamilton's face crumble as agents secured him, as Sydney retrieved the fallen drive. The empire toppling in real time. "We did it," I assured her, pressing my hand to her wound. "Help is coming. Just hold on." She smiled faintly. "You know what's strange? A week ago, I had everything but felt nothing. Now I have nothing but feel everything." "You have me," I said fiercely. "You'll always have me." The paramedics arrived, pushing me aside to work on her. As they lifted her onto a stretcher, Hamilton broke free from the agents long enough to reach his daughter's side. "Claire," he said brokenly, all pretense of power stripped away. "I never wanted this." She looked at her father for what might be the last time. "Then be better than this," she whispered. They wheeled her away, leaving me standing in the wreckage of Hamilton's empire, my hand stained with the blood of the woman who had changed everything. 3 months later, I stood in a hospital room filled with sunlight. Claire sat in a chair by the window, still thin and pale, but alive. The bullet had missed her heart by centimeters. "They're sentencing him today," she said quietly, watching birds on the ledge outside. I took her hand. "Are you sure you don't want to be there?" She shook her head. I said my goodbye that night. Hamilton Enterprises had collapsed under the weight of the evidence. Executives were cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for leniency. Sydney had made sure the victims' families would receive compensation from the seized assets. What happens now? I asked, the question that had hung between us during her long recovery. Claire turned to face me, her eyes, those same blue eyes that had looked up at me from that alley, now filled with something like peace. "I've been thinking about that community college course you took. The one that taught you how to save my life." I nodded, uncertain where she was going. "I want to create a foundation. Healthcare education for underserved communities. Emergency response training. Scholarships." "With what money?" I asked gently. "The Hamilton fortune is gone." She smiled. "Not all of it. My mother left me a trust my father couldn't touch. It's not billions, but it's enough to start something good." The sunlight caught her face, illuminating the small scar near her temple, a permanent reminder of the night our worlds collided. "And us?" I finally asked, the question that mattered most. She rose shakily from her chair, closing the distance between us. Her hands, those same hands that had once seemed so delicate and out of place in my apartment, now felt like they belonged in mine. "Us is the easiest part, Elijah Reed," she said softly. "Us is the one thing in my life that makes perfect sense." As I held her, I thought about fate and choices, about how sometimes the darkest alleys lead to the brightest possibilities. About how a man with nothing and a woman who had everything could end up with the only thing that mattered, a chance to build something real together. Sometimes saving a life means saving your own. Sometimes love is the justice we never knew we were seeking. And sometimes, in the space between heartbeats, between worlds, between who we were and who we become, we find home. Thank you for following Elijah and Claire's journey to its emotional conclusion. If their story touched your heart, please subscribe for more tales that explore the unexpected connections that change lives forever. Has someone ever entered your life unexpectedly and completely transformed it? Share your experience in the comments below. Your stories inspire new journeys.